This video is presented by MyBookie.ag. We have a double headliner on Saturday, the boxing fight between Jake Paul and Anderson Silva, as well as the UFC fights headlined by Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen, two great featherweight contenders. But first, we have to talk about that boxing fight. It's been something a lot of people have been waiting for. Jake Paul actually going to go up against an actual striker, not a wrestler, not a grappler, even though he is pretty good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but overall a very good striker, although he is a lot older, which theoretically a lot of people believe that it's going to equal out the skill difference between the two. Jake Paul is half Anderson Silva's age almost, 25 to 47, and he's undefeated as a boxer so far. He has a lot of knockout power, he has better skills than a lot of people thought that he would have, sticks behind a jab pretty well, has better reaction to punches than I anticipated, and it's something I fully have to give credit to him, man. He has gotten a lot better fight after fight. And now it's an old topic. Jake Paul has absolutely taken the sport of boxing seriously, and the guy can knock out anybody in the world with one punch. He has that kind of power. Some people have it naturally. Like I said before, you don't have to be necessarily a boxer or a fighter of some sort to be able to hit hard. Power is natural. Some people have it. Your coworker at the cubicle might be able to punch someone's lights out with one shot, and you would never know it. Jake Paul is one of those guys that has that natural, gifted power, where even if the fight is pretty tough for him, he can knock you out even in the later rounds. That's pretty impressive. Just like he did against Tyron Woodley. And Tyron Woodley hasn't been knocked out in a long time, besides getting TKO'd by Gilbert Burns, but he's never been one-shotted like that. He's never fell unconscious from one punch before, and Jake Paul was able to do that with bigger gloves. And a lot of people mentioned that, Tyron Woodley was older, and that's why he wasn't able to take the punch. Anderson's much older than Tyron Woodley, and he's been knocked out senseless before. But Anderson's boxing career so far has impressed me more than I ever thought it would have. The fact that he defeated a former world champion who was 11 years younger than him is a bigger accomplishment than a lot of people are realizing. And off of that performance alone, off of the fact that he was able to not only be competitive with an actual professional boxer, a former champion, mind you, but he beat him. And even some moments of that fight, schooled him at his old age. That performance alone, with the fact that he's been hurting everybody he's fighting, still has a sniper-like precision to his punches, it's hard to really see Jake Paul defeat Anderson Silva. The biggest thing that's against Anderson is time. Age is his biggest opponent in this fight, and it can happen overnight. He just does not feel it. He can't take a punch anymore. He doesn't want to get out there. He doesn't have that same motivation anymore. And all the comments and interviews he's been having leading into this fight has cast out a lot of doubt in a lot of fans' minds in terms of how much he actually wants to win this. That is the biggest opponent for Anderson Silva, not necessarily Jake Paul himself. Because technically speaking, Anderson does everything better than Jake Paul. There's nothing that really Jake Paul does better than Anderson. Anderson's better behind a jab. Anderson's much better with laying traps around the ring. It's actually what he made a career out of. He also has one-punch knockout power, as he's shown consistently throughout his entire MMA and boxing career. He's longer and bigger than Jake Paul as well. He has better counterpunching, he has better offensive tools. Jake Paul's skills, even up to this point, if we're going to be honest, because now he's actually fighting a striker, we can't sugarcoat his skills anymore. They're elementary at best, backed up by a super athletic guy that holds a tremendous amount of power. So this fight is definitely going to be very hard to predict because of this. If this was like prime Anderson Silva or something, then for sure Anderson would beat Jake Paul relatively easy in my opinion. Jake is still not too great on the back foot. He's still not great with his footwork. His punches are pretty nice. He can generate power because of the form of his punches sometimes, but his footwork still is way behind what a lot of these strikers have. So ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I am going to lean Anderson Silva. I'm going to have to stay true with the skill, and I'm ultimately going to pick him by a 5th round TKO. If he can get something going, if he can find his rhythm, I can see a bit of a spectacular performance, possibly a spectacular knockout from Anderson Silva's side, as Jake shows his heart, shows his toughness, but ultimately cannot withstand all the punishment. But it's interesting because Anderson is an underdog. Not a massive one, but an underdog nonetheless, and I can understand it 100%. He is so much older, and Jake Paul has been boxing only. His focus is never on something else for the past how many years. Anderson was doing MMA for a while, and now came into boxing later than Jake Paul did. Other than Anderson's first pro boxing fight, which was a long time ago, and it was the only loss in his professional boxing career, but he fought an actual boxer. And if you're riding with Anderson Silva, the absolute best place to go is MyBookie.ag because they do have really good odds on this one. Anderson might climb up and be a smaller underdog as time goes on, so the best time to go and bet on Anderson Silva is probably now. But if that's the case, if a lot of people start betting on Anderson, and let's say you're riding with Jake Paul, you probably do want to wait a little bit longer. But then again, you never know how every single fan is going to think about this fight. Who are they going to predict? I know a lot of the MMA fans are going to go with Anderson Silva, but a lot of the casual fans are going to go with Jake Paul most likely because he's more popular. And Jake has a big following behind him. So it's an interesting one on the betting odds alone, but not only that, you also have the UFC fights. This one is headlined by Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen, which is almost exactly a pick'em fight. In fact, Arnold was a little bit more of a favorite earlier today, and now it's pretty much equaled out. So it seems like a lot of money is going on Calvin right now, given that he is our higher ranked contender. He has been at the top of the division a lot longer than Allen, and he has been a bit more active than Allen as well. So with that one, it can really go either way. Another interesting one is Khalil Roundtree versus Dustin Jacoby. Dustin Jacoby definitely is the more skilled fighter. He's more technical, he's more experienced when it comes to kickboxing. But Khalil Roundtree always has the nuclear option. He always has the ability to knock out anybody in the world, no matter how good they are. He is extremely ruthless with his shots. And once he gets ahead, it's hard for him to lose the fight. His strikes are so concussive, so powerful. It's hard for anybody to come back if he starts to land those shots. So it's interesting to see that Dustin is a pretty sizable favorite. I'm definitely keeping my eyes on that one. Believe it or not, the biggest underdog of the card that possibly can win, so it's not necessarily likely, but he probably has the biggest chance out of the big underdogs, is Andrei Arlovski. Andrei Arlovski does a very good job of negating the opponent's offenses, especially the lower in the rankings he fights them. He's defeated so many younger fighters already, and it could seem pretty difficult for him to beat Marcos Rogério de Lima, given how powerful that guy is, but he is a very quick starter and gasses right after that first round. If Andre can survive the first round, knowing his chin, I don't know how likely that's going to be, but if he can do it, if he's crafty enough, if he can clinch up enough, try to take the fight to the ground, and just slow down the fight in the first, his path to win a decision is actually much higher than the odds are giving him. Chase Hooper is a massive favorite over Steve Garcia. That's interesting. Chase is a good fighter, but does make some questionable decisions in fights. I would say that your favorite of the card that's most likely going to win is either Waldo Cortez Acosta or Max Griffin. Max Griffin's been doing very well. He's in the prime of his career. And Tim Means is on the downslope. Max has been putting in some really good performances, and whether the fights are controversial like his Neil Magny fight, and that's against someone who's been a veteran, top 10 for most of his career, it's really hard to see Means beat Griffin. In my opinion, Max Griffin is the pick of the whole card. So if you want to take part of these odds, make sure to go to mybookie.ag today and get their first deposit bonus, where they'll match up your first deposit all the way up to $1,000. Put 50 to give you another 50. Put 100, they give you another 100. And all you have to do is use the promo code WEASEL, that's WEASLE, so you can take advantage of MyBookie's sign-up offer. Visit mybookie.ag today, where you can win big. And with that, let's go right into the UFC fights, specifically that main event. But first, I'll show you the rest of the fights here, who I pick. I agree with the odds on most of the fights, to be honest. Some of them I do go the other way, or I make them a more sizable favorite, but should be a pretty good card no matter what. And we're going to cover that main event. Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen. This is the best fight of the whole weekend. No matter what, I can see this fight being competitive. Arnold Allen's a dog, so is Calvin Kattar. These two guys are super tough, never back down in fights. I would say that Arnold is more well-rounded, more crafty. He's a jack-of-all-trades kind of fighter, where Calvin Kattar is mostly a boxer, has pretty good leg kicks and decent takedown defense. Can also go for takedowns himself, but against Allen, it's going to be pretty difficult for him, in my opinion. Allen's going to be the one that might attempt more takedowns and make this an actual MMA fight. Calvin Kattar is probably going to try to box his head off. But as we know from Kattar, he has gotten a lot better at it, but he's much weaker on the back foot with his boxing skill. And Arnold Allen, I don't know where this aggression is coming out of him like he put on Dan Hooker, but I think that's going to be much harder for him to do against someone like Kattar and win a fight like that. Kelvin just has a different level of toughness. In the Southpaw versus Orthodox matchup, it makes things a lot more interesting because usually from this kind of fight, Allen's throwing a lot more left hooks, whereas Kelvin is throwing a lot more right straights, and as you know, straight punches beat looping punches, so if Kelvin can time those exchanges well, he could win almost every single one of them. Allen's gonna have to catch him outside of exchanges, in an idle stance where nothing is really going on, or setting up certain strikes, getting Kelvin to throw first so he can counter, or put the pressure on Kelvin and shooting takedowns, rise into the clinch, land some elbows and knees, disengage, land some shots against the cage, go for a takedown again, be very active against Kattar to constantly put him on the defense. That is probably the best path to victory for Arnold Allen. For Calvin Kattar, it's going to come off timing the right hand. Timing the right hand and potentially left hook interceptions whenever Arnold Allen is trying to exit off on an angle, which he does very often. Allen will give the pressure up to you, and that is a very bad thing against Kattar. You never want Kattar to push you back and stalk you against the cage. He has a very long reach, a lot of power in that right hand, and he's much stronger on the front foot. He's a lot more devastating with his shots and more willing to throw his punches like that. On the back foot, he's usually trying to create an angle so he can get on the offensive. When he's on the front foot, he's only looking to hurt you. The big reason why this fight is pretty hard to predict is Arnold Allen's progression in his game. He has gained so much better every time we see him, it's hard to really know how he's going to look the next time. But ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with the more experienced fighter, Calvin Kattar. I think his pressure is going to be the main difference of the fight, as well as Arnold Allen looping punches sometimes. His boxing isn't nearly as crisp. And even if he does tag Calvin, it would be shocking if he were to hurt him. Calvin's chin is something out of this world. He's also a lot more experienced going 5 rounds. There's a lot of advantages on Calvin Kattar's side here, and as long as he can stop the takedowns as well as keep Arnold off of him if he gets pushed up to the fence, I think this fight should be won for him. So I'm going to go with Calvin Kattar, and I'm going to go by a decision win. And that's the end of the predictions, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to give this a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, and comment below what do you guys think about the fights, who do you have winning, and how. And I'll see you guys in the next video.